The Marine Fisheries Commission meeting scheduled for February 19 through 21 in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina has been postponed due to forecasted inclement weather. The following program was recorded on February 17th, the day before the announced postponement.
Interviews before the Marine Fisheries Commission meeting. David Sneed with the Coastal Conservation Association, Glenn Skinner with the North Carolina Fisheries Association, and Kathy Rawls with the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries. Today's interview is with Glenn Skinner.
Hi there, Bill Hitchcock. Welcome to the program. This is going to be the second part of a three-part series where we have interviewed David Sneed with the Coastal Conservation Association, Kathy Rawls, the director of the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries. This one, we're talking with Glenn Skinner, who's the executive director of the North Carolina Fisheries Association, which is the commercial trade group representing the commercial fishing families here in North Carolina. We're interviewing them before the Marine Fisheries Commission meeting. It's just a couple of days away. I've been showing this. When we're doing this program on Monday, February 17th, this is the forecast for Kitty Hawk, where the meeting is to be held, with a 90, 100, and 80% chance of snow Wednesday night, and Thursday. Same situation for Raleigh. By the way, as I keep saying, there's one constant thing about weather: it changes. So we'll see if this pans out. Also, I don't want you to forget to go to that homepage and click on the posts, where it says posts on the Bill Hitchcock YouTube homepage. Not only do we store all of the videos there, but we now have this polling that's going on, such as your confidence level of the Division of Marine Fisheries to handle the fisheries here in North Carolina. Right now, 64% saying, We have other polls in there, such as, should gill nets be banned in the inside waters? Go to it. The polls will change on a regular basis, but it's a new exciting feature that we got into. Right now, I want to go straight to Glenn Skinner, the executive director of the North Carolina Fisheries Association. We asked him, what's going on with the Marine Fisheries Commission meeting in 2 days? What do you think? Here he is. All right, Glenn, my primary concern right now, a Marine Fisheries Commission meeting is always a concern, and it's coming up February 19 through 21, Wednesday through Friday in Kitty Hawk. My primary concern about the meeting right now is the weather. How about you? Are you concerned?
Well, I wouldn't say concerned. If the weather hits and they delay it, I'm sure they'll reschedule it and we'll just deal with it. Our primary concern is the issues to be discussed at the meeting and the justification for some of the stuff. So,
well, here's my one. I gave you a heads up, which I never do, that I had a question for you. And here's my one question, prepared question that I have for you, and also with David Sneed with a Coastal Conservation Association. Do you feel that these quarterly Marine Fisheries Commission meetings are productive? Are you being heard, or are you just speaking to the wall?
I guess productive is a matter of opinion. We don't feel like we're being heard most of the time. And I can tell you from the commercial perspective, and probably from a large part of the recreational perspective, every one of these meetings, people are holding their breath. What are we going to lose next? And that's a concern. You shouldn't fear a meeting, and losing something through management is a big deal, but there's always this perception that you're going to get it back at some point, but we never do. And I think that's the biggest fear for everybody. Once you lose it, it's gone forever, is how it seems. So, well,
and I'm glad you brought that up. What I want to do is the North Carolina Fisheries Association, I guess once a week, maybe even quicker, for the past time period, has been sending out an emailer with a different topic that they want to discuss at the upcoming Marine Fisheries Commission meeting. The sixth fish, pardon me while I put my eyeballs on, blue crab. Well, what you want to talk about is the blue crab F&P, the false albacore rule, hard clam oyster F&P, the southern flounder F&P, and the sea trout F&P. And what I want to do is just kind of lump the crab, clam, and oyster F&P together, because basically I've got my little cheat sheet thing here. Basically, in your emails, you were saying the same thing, a lot of the same thing for those three: the crab, the clam, and the oyster. And what you were saying was no stock assessment, reliable estimates of abundance, or mortality to base management on. no reliable methods for monitoring, estimating, or managing recreational removals or effort, and all management positions are arbitrary without the necessary information. That sounds like nobody's doing anything and they're just making rules up. Is that what the Fisheries Association feels? Is that how they feel?
In some cases, I wouldn't say that nobody's doing anything. Obviously, staff puts a ton of work into these meetings and coming up with management measures. But as we interpret state law, a fishery management plan has to have a stock assessment and a stock status for these multi-year species. And the reason for that is you've got to have that starting point. You've got to say, here's our current abundance, here's what people are catching, here's where we want to be. And if you don't have all that, how are you going to expect the public to buy into this? And when you can't collect enough data to produce a stock assessment, and one of the key points in these fisheries you've mentioned, recreational data, they don't have it, but they do have a process they could have put in place 20 years ago simply to get a permit. And once you get a permit to harvest that recreationally, they can poll you, they can survey you. But right now, they don't even know who to send the survey to. So we just feel like over 20 years with this fishery management plans in place, they've missed the opportunity to collect data, and they keep coming back and saying either we don't have a stock assessment, or in the case of blue crab, they had one, updated it with a couple of years extra data, and now they say it's no longer usable when it once was.
Well, let me interrupt you there because there's an interesting thing that I think is the very first thing on Wednesday that's scheduled for Wednesday at 4 p.m. at Kitty Hawk is the MREP folks, the survey folks are going to be there. Now, you made mention that 20 years ago, they could have instituted where recreational folk could have had to get a permit to go crabbing. That way, they could have been included if you had, I'm just going to make numbers up, say 1,000 people that are going crabbing. That way, they could then do statistical surveys to come up with how much was caught, dead discards, blah, 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 blah. But they don't have that information for in the recreational side. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they collect data through MRIP for hook and line, but it's only for the hook and line fisheries. So anything like a flounder gig or a crab line or a crab pot that you set off your dock, or picking up oysters, raking clams, there's no data. And this has been a point in every one of these FMPs. They keep pointing out, hey, we don't know this. So if they adopt management, they can only adopt it on one sector, the commercial sector.
All right. And then I want to move forward. This kind of reminds me of a time I was on the bottlenose dolphin take reduction team with NOAA, and one of the first things we determined what had the least impact on a bottlenose dolphin was crab pots. And what did we spend the most time on? Crab pots. You're like, okay, all right, here we go. So I want to move forward off of the blue crab, hard clam, and the oyster FMP. I want to move into false albacore. And in your email, it says there's no stock assessment, reliable estimates of abundance, or mortality to base management on, no fisheries management plan. Then what the heck are they doing?
This was brought up by an individual commissioner. It went back and forth. It got contentious at times, but essentially what they're doing is trying to manage more or less a worldwide species. False albacore have this massive range. The Mediterranean, it's all one huge stock all over the Atlantic Ocean, and they've adopted this rule, or about to adopt this rule, that sets a trigger for harvest. And if the two sectors combined meet the trigger, it will implement trip limits on the commercial sector and bag limits on the recreational sector. And the bag limit recreationally can be up to 10 fish. It doesn't have to be 10 fish per person. It can be up to. That's the highest it can be. The highest commercial trip limit could be 3,500 pounds. And let's face it, this is North Carolina. Those trip limits will not be that highest amount. They never are. They'll be based on an average catch of what it is right now. So you could see severe cuts in what you're allowed to catch with no fishery management plan, no stock assessment, nobody else managing these species throughout their entire range except for the state of North Carolina. And we can't manage a massive stock with a broad range in one state.
Well, let me stop you there. You said no other state manages this fish except North Carolina?
If we put this rule in place, we will be the only ones anywhere not just state, anywhere that I'm aware of in the world that has management for false albacore.
Well, it reminds me of the old adage of that fish have fins, but they ain't got homes. And that's something else that I've seen come surface over the past year or two about flounder. That this seems that the I'm jumping the gun here, but it seems that with flounder management, they've looked at the sound, they looked in the inshore waters, and now they're figuring out, hey, they actually migrate out of the inlet and go out to the ocean, and sometimes North Carolina flounder go South Carolina. So again, fish have fins, they ain't got homes. Let me ask you this about the four things we've just talked about with the albacore, false albacore, crabs, clams, and oysters. What, and this is probably an unfair question, what is the impact of the recreational community on those four things?
We just don't know, and that's a big issue, and we don't really know what the impact of the commercial industry is on those four things. We don't have stock assessments. We kind of know what the commercial's catching because we have data, but we do not have a stock assessment to come up with an impact.
So it sounds like what's happening with these species is that it's based off of trip tickets, what's being brought to the dock, and they extrapolate from there.
Yeah, and with false albacore, you have MRIP data through the hook and line fishery, but again, that's just harvest data. You don't have a level of abundance to compare the harvest through, and you don't have harvest from all the other states and everything pulled together into a stock assessment.
Do we really want to invite other states or NOAA, the National Marine Fisheries Service, in and to start telling us what to do, like with the false albacore, if North Carolina is going to be the only state? It's funny, we want things managed, but we don't want managers.
Yeah, and this false albacore thing has been carried to the fishery management councils, and the councils have declined the management because of the issues. It's outside of just what we can manage here in the U.S. We don't have the information to perform stock assessments. It was carried to the councils before it was ever brought to North Carolina, and they all declined to do anything about it.
Well, let me ask you this. Is there a problem, and you can define problem any way you like, with the clams, with oysters, with the crabs, with false albacore? Is there a stock problem in the Fisheries Association's estimation?
That's really unknown in our opinion. You know, a problem, the first thing is what's sustainable. So let's take blue crab. Blue crab, the stock assessment that they used to adopt the last management said you needed 64 million mature females in the waters of North Carolina to make it sustainable. They updated the stock assessment, and I believe that jumped to 120 million. So is it 120? Is it 64 million? Is it 20 million? Is it 10 million? I don't know. And
now, I want to stop you there because when we get to speckled trout, you bring up in your emailer a very interesting thing about what is in terms of speckled trout during particular years. You got like three different assessments, which is which. But I want to move on forward. The next topic we're going to, unless I've missed something really important, I'm going to move forward into southern flounder. Can we move forward?
Absolutely.
All right. In your emailer, and I recommend, by the way, everybody, I'm on as many emailers as I can get, with a Fisheries Association, the Coastal Conservation Association, whoever. I'm on their email list. And I really appreciated this time around, maybe you do it every time, I don't know, that the Fisheries Association sent out on each species what the problem is, what they want to do, what they want to see accomplished in advance of the meeting. So, I really appreciate that. Now, southern flounder, here go the eyeballs again. In your email, it says no stock assessment, no reliable estimates of abundance or mortality estimates to base management on. No reliable method for monitoring or managing recreational quota or removals, especially dead discards. And reallocation significantly increases the level of uncertainty in the FMP. And I'm going to jump on down to reallocation places the majority of the burden of reductions on the commercial sector, essentially using commercial access as a conservation buffer to account for the state's failure to effectively monitor and manage the recreational fishery. All right, let me just hang on that very last thing that was in the NCFA emailer. the state's failure to effectively monitor and manage the recreational fisheries. How did they fail?
They failed several ways, and I've got something here. I carried this little flounder's just a hair over 8 inches.
Okay.
And believe it or not, right now, this is what the state is saying the average, not the smallest, the average size of a flounder released by the recreational community is. That's 0.21 pounds, roughly a fifth of a pound. They're using this, they used it in every year of the stock assessment that we base this management on. And as I mentioned earlier, this stock assessment, like others, when they updated it, they say it's no longer usable. But that little flounder is what they're currently using to estimate dead discards in the recreational fishery. So when they say they had 50,000 pounds, that's over 300,000 fish at a fifth of a pound. We all know that with the season closed 11 months out of the year and people releasing 3, 4, 5, 6 pound flounder all year long, that it's impossible for that average weight to be a fifth of a pound. And that creates a lot of uncertainty in that plan. When the division produces those estimates of escapement and whether we got our reduction and whether they met their quota on the recreational side, that throws a wrench in everything. You know, that 50,000 pound of dead discards, when they had a 50,000 pound overage on their quota, was likely 250, 300, 400,000 pounds that they just assumed was 50. And that's a huge difference. I mean, the discards alone in the recreational fishery could consume what both sectors are allowed to harvest sustainably, according to the division. We also have the problem.
I'm going to stop you there. Okay. I want you to say that again. I want to make sure that point is brought up.
Those dead discards in the recreational fishery, 300 plus thousand pounds of fish, if they average 1 pound or 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds, they alone could consume our entire recreational and commercial quota. And when they're underestimating those, that means they're underestimating what we're achieving, the fish that are escaping. And I have emails from division staff acknowledging that they know this is probably too small, but since they don't collect that discard data on the recreational fishery, they don't know what number to fill in that gap with. So
I think one of the things that confused me, the first thing was the 72% reduction of flounder across the board. Everybody, 72%. I didn't hear people really squeaking about that. I heard people squeaking when there was an allocation difference. Was it first 70-30, then 60-40? And it was supposed to shift to 50-50 in 2026, but they're trying to get it for 2025. So the amount is equal between the recreational and the commercial fishery. Is that a political move or a biological move in your estimation?
No doubt it's a political move, but it's also in some ways a biological move to make sure they achieve those reductions. Division staff are on record multiple times at these commission meetings saying it's okay that the recreational sector did not achieve their reduction because the commercial reduction was great enough that we're still meeting that minimum standard that we need to meet to rebuild the stock. So essentially, they're putting the burden on the commercial sector. And now to increase their likelihood of making it, they want to move that allocation up and take more from the commercial sector just to make sure they achieve their reduction. And in our opinion, that's unfair. When you pass a 72% reduction on both sectors should achieve that reduction, not one have to get an 80% or 80% plus reduction to make up for the other's failure.
Well, let me ask you this. It's when there is a real or perceived stock status issue of any species, automatically the finger either points there or points there. The commercial fault, the recreational fault, or maybe both faults. I never hear anything about water quality, which to me automatically means the development of the coast. Is that an issue that the Fisheries Association is concerned about? Water quality.
Undoubtedly, water quality and habitat loss play a huge role in the productivity of our estuaries and fish being able to spawn and grow. And flourish. So that's a key issue. It's one, as you mentioned, we hardly ever get to talk about. The Marine Fisheries Commission doesn't have that authority. Other commissions do, but we spend all our time just trying to protect what little access we have left, rather than talking about these big key issues like water quality and habitat loss.
Spend all your time beating each other up.
Yeah.
I want to move on to spotted sea trout. Let's be technically correct. It's speckled trout. Anyway, in your emailer, it says the need for reduction is highly questionable given the apparent health of the fishery. Now, I don't know when that was written or exactly when that came out. Was this before the cold stun, or has the Fisheries Association changed their attitude about that, about the health of the fishery since the cold stun event?
We're basing that on the state of the stock when they were talking about it adopting management measures. You know, we have a cold stun protocol that's supposed to protect the fish after a cold stun and allow the ones that are left to go out and spawn. And we've seen no evidence that hasn't been working since they've implemented this plan years ago. So what we base that on is really what everybody's seeing on the water. Plenty of trout, plenty of big trout, and not even the stock assessment, because again, we don't have much faith in these stock assessments. They've done 3 and they all produce drastically different results for any given year you want to look at, as we pointed out in our update.
Well, I've noticed that people favor stock assessment or a fishery management plan when it favors them, and it's not necessarily the truth or biologically correct. I want to move forward in your email, the Fisheries Association email. It says the proposed measures fail to address recreational dead discards, a major source of mortality, according to the DMF. Now, I'm going to interject something here, and I never seem to remember the exact number, but it's like for the past 20 years on the recreational side, their release has been in the 70, 75% percentile. Yes, there will be dead discards, but the amount of speckled trout they've been releasing over the past 20 years, I just think is absolutely phenomenal. I don't know of another fishery like that, but you're saying that that's the dead discards. For anybody that doesn't know, when you catch a fish alive, and you can either kill it at the boat, not mean to, and since if it's illegal size, you got to let it go, or a delayed mortality where you let the fish go, and whether a minute later, an hour later, whatever, it dies. So you're saying that there's not an accurate accountability on the recreational side by the division of dead discards and speckled trout.
What we're saying is that everybody fishing has an impact, even those who fish and don't harvest any fish. I mean, if you catch 100 trout a day, and we do that in our waters in these creeks and stuff in the wintertime, and supposedly 10 of those die. Well, you do that day in and day out, you're having an impact. But the state only manages harvest. And when you only manage harvest, you place the burden on the people who harvest fish, but you also allow the fish that are given up through these reductions, these harvest reductions, to be recouped through dead discards. Just like right now, you close the waters to protect those fish that survive the cold stun, but you can go out and fish all day long and catch trout and discard them and release them. And at some point, everybody has to be managed. We all have to accept that we're having an impact, and you find ways to reduce that discard mortality, whether it's closing a creek after a cold stun, whether it's using circle hooks, whatever it may be. You find a way through the plan to not only reduce harvest mortality, but discard mortality. If you look at southern flounder, speckled trout, red drum, any one of these plans, if the data is correct, you'll see that every time they implement a harvest reduction, discard mortality goes through the roof. And you end up killing more fish through releases in a lot of these fisheries, like red snapper, a hot topic issue on the federal side, than you do through harvest. And therefore, you have to keep limiting harvest until you can have almost no harvest, and you're only killing fish through discards, which seems wasteful in our opinion. So.
Well, that was one of the things I made mention last year about when the mandatory reporting that recreational fishermen are going to have to do in certain species, but you're reporting what you caught, not what you released. So if you caught 10 flounder, released 8, the division doesn't know about that 8. They just know about the 2 that you kept. want to move forward again. Again, we're talking about speckled trout. This is coming from the NCFA emailer. I encourage everybody to sign up. It says the approval of an inequitable 26.7% recreational and a 38.3% commercial reductions does not align with the science or state statutes which require fair management. Please explain that one to us.
Well, the recreational sector catches the majority of the trout. That's there's no doubt about that. Just like in the commercial sector for flounder, we traditionally harvested most. We don't anymore, but we did. And we feel like when they place these management measures put them in place, they try to adopt a similar reduction for both sectors. If it's 26 on one, it's 26 on the other, or somewhere as close as they can get. And that's what the division was really trying to do on this. And the commission during the meeting just kind of pulled this slot limit and stuff out of their hat on the commercial sector. And, it just seems unfair to penalize the commercial sector even further than the recreational sector when they're having the greatest impact. And of course, one of the things I want to point out, this is all about access for both sectors. Commercial access can only be harvested. We cannot have a catch and release commercial fishery. Recreational access can be both, and it should be both. It's just interesting that we keep cutting commercial harvest and we seem to be sacrificing it to make up for that recreational dead discard fishery. And in turn, we essentially cut recreational harvest, one flounder when it's open, one red drum year round, go into 3 speckled trout. If we control those recreational dead discards, those harvest limits could be higher.
Well, before we run out of time, one of the things I want to get up, and I'm going to put this up graphically for everybody to see, is the graph, which I found very intriguing. And it's with a note underneath it. This is, again, from the emailer, folks. It says the graph is presented in units of thousands of metric tons. It's a look at this graph. In the comment that you have, or the Fisheries Association has in your email, it says, was the spawning stock biomass in 2008 800,000 pounds, 3 million pounds, or 4.4 million pounds? And look at that graph. And you can see from 2008, you got 3 different answers there. It goes on to say, what about 2012? Was it 2.5 million or 6 million? Who knows? All right. I'm Joe Blow dummy off the street. What the heck's happening there? You got 3 different results in 2008 and 2 different in 2012.
Well, we had 3 different stock assessments, and each one was peer-reviewed, approved to be used. Management was adjusted based on the results of each one, but as you can see, the results were totally different from each one. And what we're trying to point out is 2012, 2.5 million pounds of mature females, or 6 million pounds in the water. That makes a difference whether the stock was overfished or not. It makes a difference on the targets and the thresholds. It makes a huge difference on the management of that fishery, and nobody knows which one is right, how many fish were really in the water. And these stock assessments, we know they're not perfect, but you don't expect to see millions of pounds differences from these stock assessments in a single year. And it makes you question whether we know enough to manage our fisheries and whether the regulations were justified. And I could do the same graph on fishing mortality from those 3 stock assessments, or the target and threshold for overfishing. And we need to be looking at these and wondering why there's so much uncertainty. And southern flounder and blue crab, why a peer-reviewed stock assessment when you simply add a few more years of data to it, it's no longer usable. This is stuff the public should be questioning, and the division staff should be looking for a solution to it to get some more certainty in these stock assessments, so we have more certainty in the need for management, and also what we expect to get out of management.
Well, this ties in. I just started at my YouTube channel, and if somebody's watching this off of some other place, go to Bill Hitchcock, just go to YouTube and do that. I started some polls. It's been less than 24 hours, and one of the questions was, what is your confidence level in the Division of Marine Fisheries to manage the fisheries. It was high, medium, or low. Last time I checked, and again, this is just a matter of hours, a whole lot of people came up, have voted, and it was 77% low confidence. Glenn, we're about to run out of time. Hang on a second. I do want to get this last thing out from your emailer. And I keep referring to this emailer, by the way, people, because you can access it. So you can see everything we're talking about here and all the things we didn't have time to talk about. This says, what you want to do is collect the necessary information from both sectors that will allow the state to fairly and effectively assess the health of our fisheries and manage all sources of mortality in a manner that benefits the people, all of them, not just a fortunate few. Anything less is simply arbitrary regulation, not management. Anything you'd like to add to that in our waning moments here?
Just that we need the data, we need some certainty in these plans, and they need to work for everyone: recreational fishermen, consumers, commercial fishermen. Everybody owns the resource and deserves access to it at some level. These stock assessments are supposed to help us determine what level. When the uncertainty is there, we just cut everybody's access, and we really need to make sure it's justified.
All right, Glenn, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed that segment we did, that interview we did with Glenn Skinner, the Executive Director of the North Carolina Fisheries Association, talking about the upcoming, we hope, Marine Fisheries Commission quarterly meeting in Kitty Hawk. Keep an eye to the sky, go to the Weather Channel, go to the National Weather Service, see what's going on, see if those meetings are going on. We'd love to hear your comments. Please post them here at YouTube and bookmark my YouTube channel, Bill Hitchcock at YouTube, for comments and for all of the videos and for the surveys and polls. Bill Hitchcock, see you next time.
Post your questions, comments, and concerns here on YouTube or email them directly to Bill Hitchcock at this address.